So last week we mentioned two possible reasons why one might be able to eat chadash in chutz la'aretz. The first reason we mentioned was from the Taz. The Taz said that since it's a shas adchak, people need a parnasa, we could rely on the shita, on the opinion of the chachamim found in the Mishnah in Kedushin. So that was a very weak svara for many reasons. So the second proposed solution would be the fact that the Mishnah in Menachos, when describing what is eligible to be brought as the carbon aimer, which is the carbon that allows one to eat from the chadash, it's mater the chadash, and the Mishnah says you can only use produce that was grown in Eretz Yisrael. That gives us a very strong indication that the only food that's aser al chadash is produce that grew in Eretz Yisrael and not things that are from chutz la'aretz. So this is mentioned by the Shagas Aryeh. The truth is the Gemara itself brings down a machlekes nameram. If we paskin like this Mishnah, there was a machlekes. But the Shagas Aryeh poses the following lamdus, as we briefly mentioned last time, that l'chayra, this is the same machlekes, that if we hold chadash is aser in chutz la'aretz, so one should be allowed to bring the carbon from chutz la'aretz. But if you tell me that chadash, that the carbon cannot be brought from chutz la'aretz, that indicates that chadash does not apply in chutz la'aretz. The problem is the Rambam himself paskins in a contradictory way. In one place, when it comes to chadash, as we mentioned, he holds you get malchus if you eat chadash in chutz la'aretz. Yet in the halachas of karbanos, he says that you can only bring the carbon from produce from Eretz Yisrael. So it's a steer on the Rambam. So the Shagas Aryeh has one teretz. His teretz is that the pasuk says kisavayu. When the Torah describes the carbon, it says kisavayu. When you come into Eretz Yisrael, and we're in Devarim these days, so the Torah says many times kisavayu. There's a longing for Eretz Yisrael when you finally get there. So perhaps that is the source of why the carbon must come from Eretz Yisrael. Nothing to do with whether or not chadash applies in chutz la'aretz or not. In a similar way, Rabbi Akiva Eiger says, the Torah says, Kitzir Chem, your cutting. It is only classified as our cutting when it's in Eretz Yisrael. That's our home. That's where we belong. That's our makom. So Kitzir Chem indicates it must come from Eretz Yisrael. So already we see that this svara, this raya, this proof is not holding so much weight, because we tried to prove that the fact that you cannot bring the carbon from chutz la'aretz, that shows us that chadash does not apply in chutz la'aretz. We already see some cracks in that svara. That could be there's a different detail why you cannot bring the carbon from chutz la'aretz. The Aruch HaShulchan argues on all these terutzim. He says perhaps the machlokes is, do we have a correlation between the prohibition of chadash and whether or not the produce is eligible to be brought as a carbon. It could be. There's two separate things. There's a carbon aimer, and there's also this isser to eat chadash. Now we assume it's all one big thing because the aimer is mater, but in the Torah we see many times where you have two seemingly connecting ideas, yet they have different rules. Maybe you could say it's based on the pasuk of kisavayu or ketzirchem, but could be that is the machlokes between the amiram, and therefore we have no proof, once again, that chadash is mutter in chutz la'aretz. Then the Aruch HaShulchan continues, after bombing away and saying, there's really nothing to rely on, he says, Kamu Gedolei Yisrael limtzai heterim. All the Gedolei Yisrael, whoever wrote a sefer, was trying to find a heter. As we mentioned in the first shir on chadash, often you'll see a discussion in the Paiskim regarding, a halachic discussion, back and forth. Sometimes you see the person going out of the way to be meko, and usually you'll find it written explicitly because people were being meko. They were trying to be malamitzchos, trying to find a heter. How could it be that all these yidden, from yidden tamid chamim, they're being meko when the book, the Shulchan Aruch, the Gemara says it's aser. You see Rav Moshe Feinstein in his tshuva on Chalav HaKompanies, he uses a similar lashon. Many Rabbanim are drinking it, trying to find a heter of why it is allowed. So Aruch HaShulchan says, Kamu Gedolei Yisrael limtzai heterim. All the Gedolei Yisrael, whoever wrote a book, was trying to find the heter. And he says, finally, zechinu, we have a great zechus of the Sefer Ar Zarua coming out, and the Ar Zarua, which is in the times of the late Rishonim, he quotes earlier Rishonim, Rabbeinu Baruch, Rabbeinu Avigdor, and these poskim say a strong reason why Chadash is mutter in Chutz La'aretz. And I just want to point out, I once heard from Rav Aryeh Leibowitz, that anytime you see the psak following Ar Zarua, Rabbeinu Baruch, Rabbeinu Avigdor, and not Rambam, Rif, Rosh, Rashba, who we would call, or Bali Tosis, we would call the primary Bali Masorah, Bali Halacha, obviously we're fishing for a limatz chas. But Baruch HaShochet admitted that. His Kamu Gedali Yisrael, Limtzei Aterim. So we're using the root of limatz chas, and they said the following. If you look in the Gemara says like this. The Mishnah, on Daf Samach Ches, it's a famous Mishnah, that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was misakin that really, when you no longer have the Beis HaMikdash, so Tez Zayin, which is the first day Chol Hamoed, that is when you should be allowed to partake in the Chadash. Now, it happens to be it's Pesach, so what exactly are you going to eat? Let's say you like to eat raw barley. So you want to eat barley on the second day of Pesach. So if you lived in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, you have to wait until the carbon was brought. So the Gemara talks about when, at what point could you assume it was brought. But for everyone else, you have to wait for the carbon. However, if you no longer have the Beis HaMikdash, so when is it mutter? So the Torah said, Be'etzem hayom hazeh, in the middle of that day. So Itzuma Shiyam, the day itself, is matter one to eat from the Chadash. So comes along Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai in Menachos Daf Samach Ches, and he was misakin that the day itself, Kol hayoim kulei aser, the entire day is aser. Why is that? So we'll take one shot found in the Rishonim. People are going to want to eat their barley snacks on Pesach. And they're going to ask their father or daddy, can we eat it? And daddy's going to say, yeah, because there's no Beis HaMikdash anymore. And you could indeed eat it right away. There's no carbon. That could be one way of dealing with it. Another way would be, hold on, don't eat it yet. Why? Because maybe the Beis HaMikdash is going to be brought. Maybe the carbon is going to be brought today. Maybe the Beis HaMikdash is going to come. The hope, the anticipation that there might be a carbon, don't eat it, wait for the entire day. Or the way other Rishonim learn, next year there's going to be a Beis HaMikdash, and we don't want to make a mistake and assume you can eat it right away. But either way, Rabbi Yochanan was misakin kol hayoim kulei aser. The entire day, one is not allowed to eat from the Omer. One is not allowed to eat from the Chadash, from the new grain. So the question is as follows. What if you live in Chutz La'aretz? You live outside of Eretz Yisrael, and you want to know, can I eat Chadash? Well, now it's Yashan. Can I eat it on Yom Tezayin? So hold on a second. Yom Tezayin in Chutz La'aretz, you're keeping Pesach. You're in Shul. It's regular Yontif. You had a Seder the night before. So the question is, we keep the Yontif out Sveika D'Yoma. That perhaps today is really Tezvav, so we're keeping Tezayin as Yontif. The question is, does Sveika D'Yoma apply when it comes to Chadash? So the Gemara in Samach Ches Amud Beis brings down that Rav Papa and Rav Huna Brei de Yeshua, they ate Chadash on the 16th day of Nisan in Chutz La'aretz. Why? And the Gemara says, because Kasavri they held Chadash b'Chutz La'aretz derabanan. Chadash in Chutz La'aretz only derabanan, and therefore Sveika D'Yoma, I should maybe it's Yom Tesvav, maybe it's really the first day of Pesach. I could be Mekel Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula, and I'm allowed to eat Chadash and Chutz La'aretz on Tez Zayin Nisan, because Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula. What's the background to this? That really we paskin like the Mishnah Menachos that told us that the carbon cannot be brought from Chutz La'aretz. That is telling us that Chadash does not apply in Chutz La'aretz on a Deraisa level. Yes, it applies on a Derabbanan level, but it does not apply on a Deraisa level. So therefore, when it comes to Derabbanans, when I have a Safek Derabbanan, I have a Safek, if today is Tezayin or really Tezvav, I could be lenient and I could eat Chadash on Yom Tezayin Nisan, because Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai does not apply in Chutz La'aretz. So that is the Gemara on Daf Samach Ches Amud Beis. So what do you see from here? That it's not an Issa D'Oraisa. Now, it doesn't help us go now munch on Chadash cake, but first of all, we could rely on the Taz. We were bothered by the Taz that how could he say Shas Chak is mutter? It's on a D'Oraisa level. Now he brought a raya. The Some Rishonim learned it's only an Issa D'Rabbanan. Additionally, this helps us understand the Mishnah regarding the Karbanos. However, we don't eat things that are Asr D'Rabbanan. And you wouldn't give hashkacha. We wouldn't give hashkacha on things that are asr d'Rabbanan. So what is this gzeira d'Rabbanan? So whenever you have a gzeira d'Rabbanan, there has to be a reason. What's the tam? So as we find in other halachas that are negeya to mitzvahs that tluyas ba'aretz, the gzeira was only on aratzas hasmuchais, on lands that border the land that's nearby Eretz Yisrael, because a person might have 1 foot in, 1 foot out, or he might confuse where he is in the northern border. By aratzas hasmuchais, we're machmer. But if you live in America, live in Europe, you don't live nearby, and therefore there's no gzeira, there is no isser d'Rabbanan in Chutz La'aretz. The Aruch HaShulchan brings us down. This is how he paskins. This is the real, by the way, this is the backbone of why many are mekel in Chutz La'aretz. Aruch HaShulchan says the Chum were mekel on aratzas that were not samach l'Eretz Yisrael. Additionally, he says another svara that we find in Masechtas Avodah Zarah that although there were certain takanos, for example, shemen shel nachri or pas akum, according to some Rishonim, that there was a gzeira, but Chacham saw that Klal Yisrael would not be able to keep it. They were mavatal the gzeira. So if they were mavatal the gzeira on Shemen, for sure they were mavatal the gzeira on Chadash, in Chutz La'aretz, perhaps even Aratzas Asmuchais, and therefore the Aruch HaShulchan said that is the reason why we are mekel in Chutz La'aretz. So we've gone through 2 reasons. We did 2 extremes. The first reason of the Taz, nobody accepted really. The second reason of Rabbeinu Baruch, that only Aratzas HaSmuchais had this Gzeira d'Rabbanan, but there's no Gzeira in America, there's no Gzeira in Europe, so that seems to be a very strong reason why we could be mekel on Chadash and Chutz La'aretz. We are not done yet. So Mirz Hashem, next time we will go through a story found in the Baal Shem Tov's writings, and that sheds light on a 3rd heter, and we have a 4th heter before we turn the page and discuss how, when, where, practically one could keep it. We still have a few more heterim to go. So Mirz Hashem in the coming shiurim.